My wife ran off with a fake real estate CEO and called him her soulmate, so I let her chase her dream until truth turned her world inside out in 48 hours. I, a 31-year-old male, came home early from a livestock auction in Denver in mid-October. The event was supposed to run through the weekend, but prices were trash and barely any quality stock was moving. I decided to bail early Thursday afternoon, thinking I'd surprise my wife Vicky, a 29-year-old female, with dinner at this fancy steakhouse she'd been dropping hints about for months. We desperately needed the time together. Married for 5 years and together for almost 8, things had definitely shifted between us lately. It wasn't openly hostile or anything, just different. That subtle change when someone's heart isn't in it anymore, but they're going through the motions. The minute I pulled up our long gravel driveway, something felt off. Her car was there, but no lights were on, despite the early evening shadows stretching across our property. Our Australian shepherd, Tucker, didn't come running out to greet me like he always did. I stepped inside our place, and it was way too quiet. Our farmhouse was never silent. Vicky always had some home renovation show playing, her favorite country playlist, or was FaceTiming loudly with her friends. But this was cemetery quiet. I called her name twice. Nothing. I started walking through our house, a renovated 1,920s farmhouse on this 15-acre ranch we'd bought 3 years ago when land outside the city was still reasonably priced. The first thing I noticed was her favorite designer jacket, missing from the antique coat rack by the door, the one I'd saved up 3 months to buy her last Christmas. Then, her riding boots were gone. The key hook where her personalized keychain usually dangled was empty. As I made my way upstairs, each step on our creaky pine floors felt heavier than the last. Our bedroom closet was half empty, hangers askew like someone had grabbed armfuls of clothes in a hurry. All her designer outfits were gone. Her expensive makeup had vanished from the bathroom counter we just installed last month. Her nightstand was cleared of the romance novel she devoured weekly. Then I spotted it. A note on our kitchen island, written in her perfect cursive handwriting on the personalized stationery her mother had given her. It read, "Found someone who really gets me. He's my soulmate. This boring marriage isn't working anymore. Moved in with him. Lawyer will contact you about divorce stuff." Just like that, 5 years of marriage ended with a hastily scribbled note. No explanation, no apology. Nothing but cold dismissal, like I was some random guy she'd met at a bar. The strangest part, I didn't explode. I should have been punching walls or calling her nonstop, something dramatic. Instead, I sat at our reclaimed wood kitchen table, feeling oddly calm, and called my attorney. Then my older brother. Deep down, I think I'd been preparing for this moment for months, without admitting it to myself. The changes in Vicky had been subtle but consistent. It started when she befriended Stacy, her new coworker at the real estate office. Stacy was a walking midlife crisis wrapped in Lululemon. 2 divorces, 3 sugar daddies, and 1 fake business. If bad influence was a person, it would be her. She drove a leased Mercedes she couldn't afford and constantly posted those inspirational quotes about leveling up and knowing your worth on social media. Within weeks of their friendship, Vicky changed her hair from natural brown to freaking platinum with pink streaks, overhauled her wardrobe, and started talking about how we needed to upgrade our lifestyle. Suddenly, my wife was spending $400.00 on Botox, buying designer purses I'd never heard of, and coming home after midnight from girls' nights smelling like she'd doused herself in perfume. She'd started making mysterious weekend work trips to show properties that never seemed to result in actual sales. I once checked her calendar out of curiosity. 3 showings at luxury condos, all with Stacy tagged as backup agent. Except the office didn't know anything about those listings, and apparently, backup agent also meant drinks and spa selfies. Her intimacy vanished completely. If I tried to kiss her, she'd turn her cheek. Any attempt at romance was met with excuses about headaches or being tired. Then came the comments about our boring rural lifestyle. how we never did anything exciting, how her friends lived in luxury condos while she was stuck playing farmer on our ranch. My buddy once told me, if her best friend's a wreck, she's just on a delay. I should have listened. Stacy was the warning label, and I ignored it. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks managing livestock auctions across 3 states, coming home to feed horses, fix fencing, and maintain our property, while she was networking at upscale bars with Stacy and her divorced friends. I even took on extra weekend auctions to save for the kitchen renovation she'd been begging for. We finished it last month. Apparently, not enough to keep her interested. Mike arrived 45 minutes after I called, despite living an hour away, bringing a stack of pizzas even though food was the last thing on my mind. He's 5 years older, settled with twins and a steady construction business, always been the steady one, watching out for me. He examined the note silently, then offered to go find her, the protective big brother ready to cause a scene. I shook my head. We sat on the wraparound porch talking until nearly midnight, him distracting me with stories about his kid's latest soccer tournament and problems with a subcontractor. When he finally left, promising to return tomorrow, I wandered through our dark house, looking at all the photos still hanging on the walls, hiking in Colorado, ziplining in Mexico for her birthday, standing proudly in front of this house the day we closed on it. Memories that now seemed like scenes from someone else's life. Tucker finally emerged from wherever he'd been hiding and pressed against my leg, sensing something was wrong. I scratched behind his ears, grateful for the company. She'd pulled away in small ways that stacked up, late nights out, dodging affection with excuses, headaches, exhaustion. I kept reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. Turns out I was sleeping next to a stranger with a 5-year exit plan. My lawyer, Dan, is a former rodeo champion who rode with my dad back in the 1990s. He transitioned to real estate law after a bad fall broke his pelvis and helped us purchase our ranch, 15 acres with a renovated farmhouse about 30 minutes outside the city limits. We nabbed it for $380,000, 0 cents, which was an absolute steal even 3 years ago. Property values in our county have nearly doubled since 4 major tech companies started building campuses nearby, bringing in waves of California transplants with cash to burn. I drove to Dan's office first thing Friday morning, skipping the auction wrap-up I was supposed to attend. His office exists in a time capsule, weathered cowboy chairs with brass tack details, faded photos of him on legendary bulls at the 1992 National Finals Rodeo, a mounted 12-point buck he got on his 50th birthday hunt. The place smells like leather conditioner, coffee, and old paperwork. Dan was surprised to see me before our scheduled meeting about some auction paperwork. I explained everything, the note, the missing clothes, the complete blind side of it all. I told him I needed to protect the ranch. He nodded and pulled up our property documents. After several minutes of searching through county records, his expression shifted dramatically. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. According to the records, I was the sole owner of the entire property. Vicky's name wasn't on the deed at all, not as co-owner, not even on our rider. I couldn't believe it. We'd bought it together and used money from both our accounts for the down payment. We'd pulled our savings, $42,000, 0 cents from me, for the 20% down to avoid PMI. Dan checked 3 separate databases, pulling up digital copies of the final documents. Everything was in my name only. The deed, the mortgage, the mineral rights, everything. My signature was the only one that appeared on any binding document. It made no sense until Dan pointed out that, as a real estate agent, Vicky would have known exactly what she was doing. She guided the paperwork exactly where she wanted it to go. The question was why she deliberately kept her name off a valuable asset. But that wasn't all Dan found. She owned another property in her name only, a lakefront cabin purchased approximately 2 years ago for $175,000. 0 cents. My stomach dropped. 2 years ago, we were in the middle of renovating our master bathroom and upgrading the horse stables. We'd been eating microwave food for weeks to save on materials. Where had she gotten that kind of money, And how had she hidden an entire property purchase? According to the records, she paid $125,000, 0 cents in cash, with a $50,000 0 cents mortgage. Purchased through an LLC first, then transferred to her personal ownership 6 months later. The more Dan dug, the darker the picture became. He found a pattern of systematic transfers from our joint checking account to her personal savings over the past 30 months, never large enough to trigger my attention. $200, 0 cents. 1 week, $350, 0 cents. Another, $500, 0 cents around tax refund time, but totaling approximately $22,300, 0 cents over time. My livestock commission earnings were funding her secret escape plan. Dan removed his glasses and fixed me with a direct look. He'd handled nearly 500 divorces over his career. This wasn't impulsive behavior. These records showed someone methodically planning an exit strategy for years. The separate property, the hidden transfers, keeping her name off our assets. This was calculated. Vicky always handled our finances. She said I was too disorganized. I didn't think much of it until Dan found consistent transfers from our joint account into hers over 30 months. Just a few hundred at a time, barely noticeable. Add that to a lakefront cabin she'd bought under an LLC and later transferred into her name, and it was clear. She'd been building her escape fund for years. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling simultaneously like the world's biggest fool and strangely relieved to understand what had been happening. "Actually nothing," Dan said with a small, knowing smile. "We wait. She'll contact you as soon as she consults a lawyer and realizes the ranch is solely in your name. If my guess is right, she's been operating under the assumption you'll have to sell and split the proceeds." Exactly 48 hours after discovering the note, my phone exploded with activity. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Vicky, starting precisely at 10:15 Sunday morning. I was out in the east pasture fixing a section of fence that Tucker had discovered was loose enough to squeeze through when they started flooding in. One notification after another, each message more urgent than the last. The first voicemail was all business, the same tone she used when calling potential buyers about property listings. She needed to discuss the ranch immediately. By the second voicemail, irritation was seeping through about why I wasn't answering. The third had desperation. We needed to move quickly on selling the ranch before the winter markets slow down. The fourth accused me of being childish for ignoring her. By the sixth call, her composure had completely dissolved into pleading to talk like adults. The irony of that request, from someone who ended a 5-year marriage with a hastily scribbled note, wasn't lost on me. I forwarded each message to Dan without responding. He texted back immediately. "Perfect strategy. Continue radio silence. She's just realizing she miscalculated badly." Around 6:30 that evening, Jack Wilcox, Vicky's father, called. Unlike my strained relationship with her mother, who always hinted I wasn't quite successful enough for her daughter, Jack and I had genuinely bonded. A retired mechanical engineer, he'd taught me everything I knew about restoring vintage engines. We'd spent countless weekends in his immaculate garage working on his prized 1967 Chevy C10, while Vicky and her mother went shopping at the upscale outdoor mall. Here, he started the call clearly agitated, saying Vicky was having a complete meltdown, claiming I'd locked her out of her own home and wouldn't discuss settlement terms. I took a deep breath and methodically explained everything. Coming home early, finding the empty closets, the cold note, discovering the hidden lakeside cabin she'd purchased without my knowledge, the systematic draining of our joint account over years. There was complete silence on his end as I laid out the facts. When he finally responded, his voice was heavy with disappointment. Apparently, she told her parents they'd been having problems for months and mutually decided to separate. She said I'd become verbally abusive when she brought up dividing assets fairly. They'd been letting her stay in their guest room because she claimed I'd threatened to change the locks if she came back. That manipulation made my blood boil, but I kept my tone even. None of that was remotely true. The note I found was the only communication we'd had. I explained the truth. She left me with a note and no explanation, and the property wasn't even in her name. Unlike Vicky, Jack was a man of his word. He called back 3 hours later. He'd spoken with her directly and showed her the text with a photo of her note. She finally admitted what really happened. Jack and his wife didn't support how she handled this. This wasn't how we raised her, were their words. He exhaled heavily and explained she'd always had her mother's approach to finances. Secretive, always maintaining separate accounts, keeping options open. He should have warned me years ago when he saw her insisting on separate bank accounts even after marriage. His wife had pulled similar stunts early in their marriage until he discovered her secret credit cards and threatened divorce if it continued. The parallel explains so much about Vicky's behavior. She'd learned financial deception at home. When Jack asked about my plans going forward, I told him honestly I was still figuring that out, but I definitely wasn't selling the ranch. This place was supposed to be our forever home, and I still wanted that for myself. "Don't blame you one bit," Jack replied. Between us, he thought I was getting the better end of this deal. That new fellow she'd taken up with, Jason something, had come by to pick her up yesterday. He drove some leased European sports car he probably couldn't afford and wore more jewelry than Jack's wife. His old man's intuition said this guy wasn't in it for the long haul. After we hung up, curiosity got me checking social media, something I normally avoided. Stacy's Instagram was filled with thinly veiled references to the situation, photos of her and Vicky at expensive restaurants with captions like, "upgrading her life," and "men never know what they had until it's gone." The audacity was stunning, coming from a 38-year-old woman who'd burned through 2 marriages and was rumored to be dating her married boss. Comments from their circle ranged from "preach girl" to "his loss" to "living your best life now." I wondered if any of them knew the real story, or if they were all operating on Vicky's victim narrative. I disabled all my social accounts that night and sat on the porch swing with Tucker. He'd been unusually clingy since Vicky left, despite her constantly complaining about his shedding and banishing him to the mudroom whenever her sophisticated friends visited. Dogs have better instincts about people than we give them credit for, yet they love unconditionally anyway. He rested his head on my knee and gazed up with those loyal brown eyes. At least someone in this house had genuine emotions. 3 weeks after finding the note, I was rebuilding the fence in the south pasture when Vicky's car came flying up the driveway, kicking up gravel and dust. She'd finally figured out that the ranch wasn't in her name. I didn't even put down my tools, just kept hammering posts while she stormed across the field toward me. She looked different. Blonde hair freshly highlighted, designer jeans tucked into expensive boots that had definitely never seen actual farm work, chunky jewelry that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage. She was playing the part of the sophisticated city girl who'd outgrown her country husband. "We need to talk about the ranch," she demanded, not even bothering with hello. I just kept working. "Did you hear me? I said we need to discuss selling this place. My lawyer says we need to list immediately." I finally looked up. "Nothing to discuss. It's not for sale." Her perfectly made-up face twisted in confusion. "What do you mean it's not for sale? We have to divide our assets." I didn't respond, just pulled another fence post from my truck bed. "Ryan, stop being difficult. We both know we need to sell and split the money. I've already talked to my broker about listing it." I stayed silent for another minute while she got increasingly nervous. Finally, I said, "You should probably check the property records before making plans." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The ranch isn't in your name. Never was. You made sure of that when we bought it." The confusion on her face was almost comical. "That's not possible. We bought it together." I shrugged. "Deed says different. So does the mortgage. Check for yourself." Her face went through a series of expressions. Disbelief, confusion, then dawning horror as she realized I was telling the truth. "But we both paid for the down payment." "Yep." "And you arranged all the paperwork, made sure everything was in my name only. Guess you outplayed yourself." That's when the conversation shifted. Suddenly, she was all sweet and reasonable, asking if we could talk about this like adults. She followed me around the pasture like a lost puppy as I continued working. When that didn't work, she switched to guilt. Didn't I remember how we found this place together, how she helped design the layout, how she'd supported my career? I finally stopped and faced her. You mean like how you supported me by stealing $22,000 0 cents from our joint account? Or by secretly buying a lakefront cabin while I was eating ramen to save for our renovations? Her eyes widened with that deer in headlights look. Busted. She tried to claim the cabin was an investment property she was going to surprise me with once it appreciated enough. Yeah, right. I asked her if that's why she hid all the paperwork and claimed the withdrawals from our joint account were an investment. Her eyes snapped back to mine. You've been checking up on me like I was the one who did something wrong. Wouldn't have had to if you hadn't been stealing from me. She flinched at the word stealing and tried claiming that money was partially hers. I reminded her that her paycheck went into her personal account, while only my income went into the joint account. So no, actually, it wasn't hers at all. The truth was dawning on her face. I knew everything. She tried another approach, saying Jason, her new soulmate, was going to help with cabin repairs, but his company was having cash flow issues. She was counting on her portion from selling the ranch to fix everything. Not my problem, I said simply. Maybe your soulmate isn't as financially stable as you thought. Her face hardened. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Being difficult just to punish me? No, just following the legal documents you arranged. Funny how that worked out. She tried everything after that. She said I was being vindictive, brought up how she found this place and designed the kitchen renovation. She even had the nerve to say she deserved compensation for putting up with living so far from the city. But our bank statement showed I'd paid for 80% of everything, while she was secretly stashing cash. What you didn't plan for, I told her finally, was leaving before land values here peaked. If you'd waited another year, this place would be worth $150,000 0 cents more. Shitty timing on your part. Her face showed the truth of my words. She'd miscalculated, thought the ranch would be an easy payday in the divorce. Finding out it was solely in my name had thrown her entire plan off. She threatened weakly to get a lawyer. I informed her I already had one. She stormed back to her car, turning back once to shout, "This isn't over," before peeling out down the driveway, sending dust flying. After she left, I changed all the locks and codes, immediately called Dan with an update, and started planning my next moves carefully. The thing about working livestock auctions is you learn to read people. Know when they're bluffing about a bid, when they're desperate to sell, when they're trying to drive up the price artificially. Vicky thought she was being clever, but she was broadcasting her desperation like a neon sign. Dan advised not responding to anything without running it by him first. She tried to get me to agree to things in writing or make verbal agreements over the phone, but I shouldn't fall for it. I went through our entire house that weekend documenting everything of value. Furniture, appliances, electronics, tools. I took photos, found receipts where I could, anything to establish what was mine before she could try to claim it. I found some interesting things in the process. A hidden shoebox in the back of our closet with jewelry I'd never seen before. A stack of credit card statements in her name with charges at hotels I'd never been to. The evidence of her double life was everywhere once I started looking. The texts slowed down, then stopped completely when she realized I wasn't responding. Her dad called again to apologize and let me know they weren't giving her money. She made her bed, he said, sounding tired. Her mother's the same way. Thinks she can always find an easy fix for her problems. Never works out that way. Through mutual friends, I found out her soulmate Jason was this flashy developer who just finalized his own divorce. The guy was leveraged to the eyeballs on several failing projects. Started building luxury condos right before the market softened. Their relationship apparently hit the rocks when he realized she wouldn't be bringing any ranch sale money to help fund his next sure-thing investment. 2 weeks after she left, I got formal divorce papers. Interestingly, there was no claim on the ranch, just a request for division of other assets and $3,200 0 cents monthly in spousal support due to her significantly lower income. My lawyer laughed at that one. We had records showing she made almost as much as me, but had hidden most of it. While sorting through old files in our home office, I found something interesting. Her loan application for the cabin listed an income 40% higher than what she reported on our taxes. Tax fraud is no joke. I kept that info in my back pocket just in case. Dan suggested we use it as leverage if needed, but otherwise hold off. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone self-destruct, he said. From what you're telling me, she and this developer boyfriend are headed that way, with or without your help. Instead of fighting over small stuff, I agreed to let her have the furniture she wanted and even our newer SUV. Dan thought I was being too generous, but I was playing the long game. I wanted the divorce finalized quickly with minimal drama. Fighting over couches and cars would just drag things out. My brother Mike wasn't convinced when I told him my strategy. He felt like I was letting her win. I explained I was keeping what mattered: the ranch, my retirement accounts, my tools and equipment. She could have the IKEA furniture in the car with 60,000 on it. I'd come out ahead in the end. I kept working, kept taking care of the ranch, kept my head down. I let her think I was just rolling over on the small stuff because I was hurt, or trying to take the high road. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything I found about her financial situation: the hidden income, the tax discrepancies, the money she'd siphoned from our joint account. During this time, I also learned more about Jason through industry connections. His company had overextended on 3 different developments. Banks were calling in loans. Contractors were filing liens for unpaid work. The guy was a house of cards waiting to collapse, and Vicky had hitched her wagon to his star right as it was burning out. I also knew from her social media that things between them were rocky. She'd stopped posting those living my best life photos, and Stacy's comments had changed from "you deserve happiness, babe" to vague supportive stuff like "hang in there, better days ahead." The fantasy was crumbling faster than she'd expected. 4 months later, the divorce was nearly final. I kept the ranch and started making changes. I converted her home office into a workshop where I could restore vintage motorcycle parts. My side business was finally taking off now that I had time to focus on it. The ranch was starting to feel like mine again. I repainted the living room a dark green that she'd always hated, bought a leather couch to replace the uncomfortable modern one she'd insisted on, and let Tucker sleep on the bed. Small changes that made the place feel less like a museum and more like a home. My brother kept trying to set me up with his wife's friends, but I wasn't ready. Instead, I focused on my job as the regional livestock auction manager, rebuilding my savings and reconnecting with buddies I'd neglected during my marriage. I joined this local classic vehicle restoration club that got me out of the house on weekends. I ran into Stacy at the grocery store about 5 months after Vicky left. She looked surprised to see me, then uncomfortable. I casually asked how Vicky was doing, like I was inquiring about any old acquaintance. Stacy lied badly, saying she was good, really good, loving her new life. I smiled in a way that made her squirm and asked how Jason's development company was doing, mentioning the issues with his River Heights project. Her eyes widened slightly. I wouldn't know about that. No, huh? Just figured since you guys all hang out together you'd have heard. Those contractors filing liens for unpaid work, the bank threatening to foreclose. Messy stuff. She mumbled something about being late for an appointment and practically ran to the checkout. I knew the information would get back to Vicky within the hour. Let her wonder how much I knew. I also knew from checking public records that the cabin she bought had serious structural issues. The property tax assessment had been reduced by 30% due to significant foundation defects requiring major repairs. Estimates for fixing that kind of damage usually start around $60,000. 0 cents. Money she definitely didn't have if she was asking for spousal support. Her dad called occasionally to check in on me. We still had that connection through our shared love of classic trucks. During one of these calls, he mentioned that Vicky had asked to move back home temporarily, but her mother had refused. Margaret said she'd made her choice, and it would just enable her if they let her come running home every time life got hard. 8 months after she left, everything fell into place better than I could have planned. Jason's development company filed for bankruptcy protection. The news was all over the local business journal. The cabin she'd bought had been officially condemned by the county due to the foundation issues, making it essentially worthless. And most beautiful of all, the IRS sent her a notice of audit for the past 3 years. Funny how anonymous tips work sometimes. I was at the grocery store picking up stuff for the week when I literally ran into her coming around the end of an aisle. Her cart hit mine with a metallic clang. She looked rough, not as put together as usual. Nothing like the polished woman who'd shown up at the ranch months ago. After awkward greetings, she asked if we could talk somewhere. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We ended up sitting in my truck in the parking lot, her fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "I've made some bad decisions," she admitted, voice shaking. "No shit," I replied calmly. She broke down then, telling me everything. How Jason had convinced her to invest $30,000, 0 cents in his latest project, money she'd partly gotten from selling jewelry I'd bought her over the years. How the cabin was essentially worthless now. How the IRS was breathing down her neck for discrepancies in her reported income. "I don't know what to do, Ryan. I'm drowning here." Tears were smudging her mascara. I just sat there, letting the silence fill the cab of my truck. Part of me felt satisfaction seeing her like this, karma coming full circle. But another part, the part that had loved her for 8 years, felt hollow. This wasn't a victory, just a sad ending to what I'd thought was a good story. Finally, she whispered, asking if I could help her, maybe let her move into the guest room at the ranch for a few weeks until she got back on her feet. "Interesting," I said. "So you leave me with a note, tried to take half my property, and now you want my help?" She claimed she was desperate. Her parents wouldn't even talk to her anymore. Jason and she had broken up weeks ago. Stacy was ghosting her since she couldn't afford to go out anymore. I was the only person who might understand. Understand what? Being lied to? Having money stolen from me? Finding out my marriage was basically a long con? "It wasn't like that," she protested weakly, "at least not at first. I really did love you, just not enough to be honest with me." I pulled out a folder I happened to have in my truck and handed it to her. Inside was every document I collected, the bank transfers, tax discrepancies, loan applications with different income amounts. Her face went white when she realized I was the one who triggered the IRS audit. She begged me not to send anything else, saying she'd lose everything. Her license, possibly face charges. Should have thought about that before taking $22,000 0 cents from our account. "What do you want?" she asked, defeated. "Nothing. That's the beauty of it. I've already won. Keep the SUV, I don't care. But if you ever try to come after me or the ranch again, the rest of this goes to the IRS, your broker, and anyone else who might be interested." She admitted she was stupid for throwing away a good life for nothing. She let Stacy convince her she was missing out on life, that she deserved more exciting things, a more glamorous lifestyle. Turns out boring and stable beats exciting and broke any day, and it only cost her her marriage, career, and reputation to figure that out. Bargain. She winced at my sarcasm but didn't argue. When she asked if I thought I'd ever forgive her, I thought about it. Honestly, don't know. But it doesn't really matter if I do or don't. We're done either way. She tried asking if I was seeing anyone. I told her it wasn't her business, but no, I was taking time for myself. "Smart," she nodded. "I should have done that after Brad." Brad was her ex before me. They'd broken up just 2 months before we met. I'd always suspected I was the rebound guy, but it hadn't seemed important back then. "For what it's worth," she added. "The ranch looks good. I drove by last week. The new fence in the south pasture. It's nice." "Didn't do it for your approval," I replied. "Did it because it needed doing." The final divorce papers were signed the next week. No alimony, no claims on anything of mine. Her lawyer looked relieved to be done with the whole thing. The last I heard, she had to sell her cabin at a massive loss, lost her real estate license temporarily due to the tax issues, and moved back in with her parents. At 29, Her dad confirmed it when we met up to work on his truck the following month. "She's humbled," he told me, handing me a wrench. "Never thought I'd see the day." "People change when they have to," I said. The truth was, I was better. The ranch was thriving. I'd added 3 horses to board for extra income. My motorcycle restoration business had taken off enough that I was considering cutting back my auction hours. The ranch is peaceful now. No drama, just me, Tucker, and the horses, and occasionally inviting friends for dinner. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but it's a good one. Turns out sometimes the worst things that happen to you lead to the best places you can go. And sometimes the trash really does take itself out.